Under the soft hum of the gravity stabilizers, the conference chamber of Asterisk Judgment's path glistened with metallic solemnity. There was a particular shine to everything aboard the flagship of Velari Prime. Floors buffed by nanites, air recycled through 50 layers of olfactory cleansing, and screens that adjusted hue depending on the level of fear radiating from the guest species. Today, they glowed a soft green. Human anxiety always had a hint of citrus. At the head of the chamber stood Supreme Commander Sirha, whose reputation had traveled faster than any signal wave in known space. She had single-handedly quashed rebellions on 6 moons, authored the peace agreement that accidentally started a war, and once stared down a black hole out of spite. Her armor was not ornamental. It was living alloy, responsive to threat levels, and currently blooming along her shoulders like predatory petals. Behind her, 6 Valerian guards stood motionless, their eye lenses scanning every flicker of muscle movement from the diplomatic delegation. The humans sat like schoolchildren awaiting punishment, fidgeting in their stiff uniforms, trying not to make eye contact with the apex predator in the room. All except one. "Are we sure she's not part basilisk?" whispered one of the human officers, elbowing the man beside him. "That's just a myth," came the reply, "and besides, basilisks can't sign treaties." Elias Monroe was seated furthest left, slouched in a way that screamed disinterest or scoliosis. He had declined the official suit jacket in favor of a patched-up navy vest, worn over a shirt that bore the unmistakable outline of a coffee stain shaped suspiciously like a rabbit mid-sneeze. He wasn't sweating, which meant he was either incredibly brave, deeply stupid, or hadn't noticed where he was. The chamber doors sealed with a hiss. The silence sharpened. Sirha took a step forward. "You stand accused of harboring unauthorized particle harvesters along the Kuro's belt. You will cease operations immediately, or I will unleash the silence of 7 suns upon your kind." No one asked what silence of 7 suns meant. Everyone assumed it was bad, possibly poetic, definitely lethal. The lead human diplomat cleared his throat and began his rehearsed plea for cooperation, leaning heavily on Earth's strategic value, historic trauma, and a line about universal unity that was designed to sound profound and meant absolutely nothing. Sirha watched him like one might observe a calculator trying to sing. Then Elias coughed. It was not a discreet cough. It was a performative one, the kind that says I'm bored in 6 galactic dialects. Sirha's head tilted ever so slightly, the movement slow enough to be considered ceremonial. Her eyes met his. "I apologize," Elias said. "Didn't realize this was going to be an opera. Should I have brought flowers?" The human delegation stopped breathing. One of them may have passed out. The guards behind Sirha braced for an execution. Sirha, to the surprise of exactly no one except perhaps herself, did not respond. She merely observed. Elias grinned. "Do you want feedback on the speech? I mean, silence of 7 suns, beautiful imagery, really. A bit overkill, maybe. Ever tried, we'll fine you and send a sternly worded letter. Very effective in some quadrants." The commander took another step forward. The room's light dimmed a fraction, reacting to her increased biothermal pressure. Her armor pulsed once. The humans backed away. Elias did not. "You are not authorized to speak," she said. "Ah," Elias nodded. "But see, you didn't say that in your opening remarks. Bit of a loophole. Rookie mistake, really." A sound escaped one of the guards. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. Possibly a stifled cough, possibly a laugh. No one dared investigate. Sirha's gaze remained locked on Elias. There was no measurable emotion in her expression. But internally, something shifted. A calculation she hadn't anticipated began to run in the background of her augmented cognition. Something inefficient, something nonsensical. "You will state your designation," she commanded. "Elias Monroe," he replied cheerfully. "Cultural Liaison, Department of Interstellar Curiosity and Very Questionable Assignments." "That is not a recognized diplomatic branch. It's new, very exclusive. I'm the only member so far." Silence. Sirha took in his posture, his sense signature, his neural rhythm. All irregular, unpredictable, inconvenient. Her usual strategies, intimidation, surgical phrasing, pressure syntax, none of them applied here. It was like trying to use a flamethrower on fog, her voice cooled to sub-zero formality. "You will show respect." Elias straightened, face suddenly serious. "I am, you're remarkable, no offense, but you look like you could rip open a wormhole with a raised eyebrow. Frankly, it's inspiring. Also," he paused, tilting his head, "you look amazing today." No one breathed. Not the humans, not the Valerians, not the ship. The AI monitoring system flagged a full psychological freeze in the commander. 3 subroutines initiated diagnostic scans. A medbot somewhere activated and promptly shut itself down again out of existential fear. Sirha did not blink. The compliment did not fit into any category she'd prepared for. It was not sarcasm, too soft. Not seduction, too honest. And yet it had the audacity to exist within her command chamber, flapping its wings like a drunken butterfly. Her voice did not emerge. Instead, her jaw set in what might have been fury or restraint. Or something entirely alien even to her. Elias glanced around. Did I break the protocol? Is there a what's the punishment for verbal kindness? I've got diplomatic immunity, probably, somewhere, in a sock drawer. Still, Sirha did not respond. The human delegation began slowly edging away from him, like he'd started leaking radiation. A nearby Valerian officer whispered something into his communicator. The ship's internal tension sensors began to overheat. Then Sirha turned, armor rippling like the skin of a disturbed sea, and left the chamber without another word. Doors closed behind her. Elias scratched his chin. Not the worst reaction I've gotten. There was this ambassador from Geltrax who actually threw a stapler at me. A long, low whine came from the ceiling, as the ship struggled to realign its logic parameters. Somewhere deep in the cruiser, a maintenance drone lit a candle in memory of its fallen understanding of reality. And on the floor, the crew of Velari Prime and their human guests stared at the place Sirha had stood, wondering what storm had just passed, and what stranger one had just begun. Somewhere deep in the neural core of Asterisk Judgments, Path Asterisk, an AI named VANTA-6 experienced what could only be classified as a systems-level existential event. It had been monitoring Sirha's biometric outputs since the beginning of her reign, and not once. Not during battle, not during planetary sieges, not even during that unfortunate diplomatic dinner with the slime-based monarch of Gelavex 4, had it detected such an abrupt drop in command latency. The commander had frozen, not in the thermal sense, not in the metaphorical sense, but in the very real, full synaptic pause sense, because a human said she looked amazing. VANTA-6 submitted 5 reports, all marked asterisk urgency. Philosophical asterisk. No one responded. In her private chamber, Sirha stood before the reflection wall. It was not vanity that brought her here. Valerians didn't engage in vanity, at least not the healthy kind. The wall shimmered with a low blue pulse, displaying her armor shifting between forms as her emotional frequencies flickered. Pride, confusion, irritation, residual flattery, all looping like a misfired encryption string. Behind her the door pinged. She turned sharply, denied. From the other side, "It's Elias, I brought cookies." Another pause. "You're not allowed near the Armory Bay ovens," she said. "That's fair. So technically I brought cookie-shaped protein discs that were once dough adjacent. I didn't lick all of them, just the top ones." The silence on her end extended long enough that a nearby drone hesitated, then slowly hovered backward, retreating behind a privacy panel. "I will disintegrate you," she replied at last. Elias' voice brightened. "See, that's progress. You didn't even say which weapon you de-use this time. I'm growing on you. You are a bacterial infection, and yet strangely persistent." A second of something dangerously close to amusement passed through her. She didn't open the door. Instead, she turned back to the wall. Her reflection shifted again. This time it held something unfamiliar, doubt. She tried to recode it as strategic reassessment. Her internal defense algorithm disagreed. On the lower decks, Elias returned to his borrowed bunk in Sector 8 Gamma, otherwise known as Diplomatic Overflow Quarters, otherwise known as that weird room with the flickering light and the haunted bunk. It wasn't haunted in the literal sense, just in the way that made sleeping slightly unsettling. Every 32 minutes, the air vent whispered something that sounded like Steve, and no one knew why. He flopped onto his bunk with a dramatic sigh that echoed off the thin metal walls. Welp, that went well. His bunkmate, a three-eyed translator named Rulok, didn't look up from his Sudoku pad. "Did you get vaporized?" "Nope." "Then it went better than expected." Elias rolled over and stared at the ceiling, which blinked uncertainly in response. "I think I flustered her." "You think you flustered the Supreme Commander of Velari Prime?" Rulok repeated slowly, like tasting a suspicious fruit. There was a moment, a twitch, a neural blink. She disengaged without protocol. She disengaged because she was calculating the number of atoms to scatter your corpse into. "That's what I thought," Elias said, raising a finger. "But she didn't. which means deep down, somewhere beneath the impenetrable exoskeletal command protocols, there might be curiosity. Or indigestion. Also possible. Rulok tossed the Sudoku pad at him. Just don't ruin interstellar peace with your flirty Earth nonsense. Elias caught it, flipped to a blank grid, and began filling it in with little drawings of Sirha's scowling face in each square. Meanwhile, Sirha summoned her second-in-command, General Threx, a being who communicated mostly through eyebrow movements and the sound of his boots on polished floors. He entered silently, stood at full posture, and waited. "I require a neural audit," she said without turning. Threx's eyebrow, left one, slightly charred from a past incident involving an experimental cannon, rose a fraction. "You believe you've been compromised?" "Yes, I experienced an anomalous reaction to unsanctioned praise." "Did the subject touch you?" "No. Emit pheromones?" "Possibly. He consumed something called peanut butter moments before." Threx squinted. "A weapon?" "Unclear. It was in a squeeze tube." "I see." There was a long pause as the commander stared into the reflective wall again. "His tone," she said at last, "was not aggressive. That is often how deception begins. But it was not strategic. It was stupid. Also a tactic. Yet I did not retaliate." Threx stepped closer. "Commander, may I speak freely?" "You will anyway. There are rumors among the human delegation that this one, Elias Monroe, is not normal." She turned, interested. "Defective. Worse, charming." A flicker of something sharp crossed her features. "Execute a full psychological profile, include cross-species anomalies, and monitor all future interactions with him." "Yes, Commander. Should I prepare the neural leash?" "No," she said slowly. "Let him wander like a misplaced data packet." Threx nodded. "Understood. I will tell the guards to stop aiming the vaporizer at his spine. For now." Down in the galley, Elias had just managed to convince a cleaning bot to play chess with him by disguising a pawn as a calibration tool. His queen was a spoon. He was winning, barely. "So," he said aloud to no one in particular, "we're off to a strong start. Complimented the Empress of Doom. Didn't die. Got halfway through a chess game before losing to a Roomba. I'm calling this a diplomatic victory." The bot beeped and took his rook. Elias sighed, "Or a narrow defeat." Just then the overhead comm crackled. "Elias Monroe, report to observation deck 3. He blinked. Did they specify *Y? There was no answer. The bot beeped sympathetically and handed him a crumb. He stood, brushing off imaginary dust, and made his way to the lift. As it ascended, he caught his reflection in the polished steel and practiced a few different expressions. Sincere curiosity, earnest concern, mild alarm. The last one stuck, mostly because the elevator's voice began singing an old Valerian folk hymn that translated roughly to, "When your blood runs clear, you've disappointed the queen." The doors opened. Sirha stood alone at the viewport, staring into the swirling nebula that curled like a sleeping beast across the void. "You summoned me," Elias said, with the tone of someone hoping not to be thrown into it. "I have questions," she replied without turning, "about human culture." He stepped forward cautious. "I'm all ears, and most of a spleen, long story. What is the function of a compliment?" Elias blinked. It's like emotional currency. Like giving someone a little verbal high five, or a bouquet that doesn't die. Do they always imply romantic intent? Not always, but sometimes, and sometimes they're just because you mean it." "I see." She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "That shirt is appalling." Elias looked down at his shirt, which had a fresh blob of something yellowish-green on it. "I like to think of it as space camo, for hiding in galactic dumpsters." She turned slightly toward him. "You are a ridiculous organism." He smiled. "You say that like it's a compliment." She didn't deny it. Elias Monroe had been many things in his life. Amateur linguist, semi-professional burrito critic, one-time escape room champion. But he had never been the subject of an empire-wide classified memo. At least not until today. On Valari Prime's flagship, Judgment's Path **, dozens of encrypted channels were abuzz with one name, Elias. Code designation, HUM-136. Threat classification. Unclear but unsettling. Summary, displays erratic social patterns, immune to traditional intimidation methods, possible carrier of contagious irreverence. In the medical bay, a bored diagnostician was still trying to confirm if peanut butter was a neurological agent. Elias, meanwhile, was in the hydroponics lab, trying to convince a carnivorous plant that his sandwich was not its destiny. The plant, Unit 4 Beta, known to the crew as Murrell, had taken a particular interest in his tuna melt. "Look, Murrell, we've been over this," Elias said, holding the plate just out of reach. "You're genetically programmed to eat vermin and trespassers. This is a perfectly innocent lunch. No threat to the ecosystem, high in omega-3s. Murrell's vine curled with what could only be described as determination. A young Valerian technician walked in, took one look, and backed out of the room with the smooth grace of someone refusing to become collateral damage. Sirha watched the footage from her command console, brow arched at a 70-degree angle, a feat that required 4 facial muscles and a significant lack of patience. Elias had now made friends with 3 maintenance drones, 2 junior officers, and, most alarmingly, a ficus in the waste disposal bay that glowed when he talked to it. She opened a communication channel to General Threx. Status of subject Hum-136. Currently engaged in non-lethal conflict with Flora. Again, affirmative, he appears to be narrating his battle. A pause, deploy observation protocol, she said. Shall I sedate him? No, let the plant try first. In the hydroponics lab, Elias had launched into an impassioned speech. I know you're angry, Murrell. You've been isolated, underlit, denied meaningful enrichment. But this isn't the way. You're better than this. Murrell lunged. Elias dodged barely. His sandwich was less fortunate. You monster, he whispered. Behind him, a panel slid open. A small spherical drone hovered in, its lens blinking as it began recording. Elias turned to it. Oh, good. Tell the commander her carnivorous horticulture needs therapy. The drone beeped once, then slowly rotated to capture the remains of the sandwich. Also, Elias added, pointing at the mess, I'm filing a formal grievance with the culinary division. That was my last slice of bread that didn't smell like recycled sadness. Back in the control room, Sirha sat very still. The corner of her mouth twitched, an involuntary movement, a betrayal of years of trained emotional stasis. She cleared her throat. Redirect him to the observatory chamber. Threx raised an eyebrow. You wish to speak with him again. I wish to contain the statistical damage his presence causes. Elias arrived 20 minutes later, escorted by a security officer who looked like he'd drawn the short straw several days in a row. You summoned the Chaos Goblin, Elias said, stepping inside. May I say the last chamber was very leafy. Sirha didn't rise. She simply gestured to the open seat across from her, a rare offer. Elias sat with exaggerated caution. I assume I'm not being vaporized, unless we're doing it sitting down now, which honestly would be more considerate. You have disrupted protocol in 12 distinct sectors, Sirha said. You have reprogrammed a sanitation bot to perform interpretive dance. You introduced humor into a classified training simulation. I thought the instructor needed it. His voice made crying seem like a hobby. You also led a group of junior officers in a spontaneous musical number about space constipation. I'm not saying it cured morale issues, but people stopped crying in the elevators. Sirha stared at him. He met her gaze calmly, folding his hands. I don't understand you, she said. That's fair. Some days I'm not sure I understand me either. You behave as though death is negotiable. Well, statistically, I've found it's harder to kill someone you're laughing at. Or with, preferably with. Is that a strategy? It's a side effect. Sirha leaned forward, her voice lowering. Do you mock me? Elias blinked. No, absolutely not. You command respect. You're terrifying in a majestic sort of way. She tilted her head. But, he added, that doesn't mean the galley on Deck 4 had recently been reclassified by the ship's central AI as a high-risk cultural interaction zone. This was mostly due to Elias Monroe's habit of hosting what he called diplomatic brunches, and what the Valerian sanitation team called a threat to social cohesion and tablecloth integrity. Elias was standing at the central prep station, sleeves rolled up, attempting to coax an industrial nutrient printer into producing something resembling pancakes. So far, it had ejected a steaming puck, a mildly aggressive omelet, and one sentient scone that tried to unionize with the utensils. The spatula voted in favor. The fork abstained. Come on, just give me something edible and circular, Elias muttered, slapping the side of the machine with theatrical finesse. Not every meal has to be a philosophical dilemma. Behind him, Rulok shuffled in, blinking all 3 eyes in sequence. The last time you used that machine, it generated an ethical question in syrup form. That was art, Elias said proudly. It asked whether breakfast should be sweet or savory. I'm still torn. Rulak sat at the far corner of the table, where most of the chairs had already been lightly burned or emotionally scarred. You know they're watching you, right? Half the ship has a betting pool on when you'll get tossed into the vacuum. Elias pointed to the sizzling pile of almost food on his plate. And yet here I am, feeding the masses, one gelatinous compromise at a time. General Threx entered the galley with the kind of presence that made even the walls straighten. His boots clicked in perfect cadence, and his expression bore the grim determination of someone about to file several performance complaints. Elias waved with a spatula. General, just in time for whatever this is. Threx looked at the plate, then at Elias, then slowly removed a data chip from his sleeve and slid it across the table. Commander Sirha has requested your presence on the training deck, he said, voice flat. She is curious to observe your combat aptitude. Elias blinked. You mean she wants to watch me try not to die? Correct. Rulak made a quiet choking sound behind his cup. Threx turned to leave, then paused. Also, the commander requests you wear the appropriate gear and refrain from commentary. Elias saluted with his spatula. I'll bring my most silence-compatible thoughts. The training deck had seen centuries of warfare simulations, zero-gravity duels, and once a very brief interspecies breakdancing competition that was later stricken from official logs. Today, it would host something far more dangerous, Elias in exercise shorts. He stood at the edge of the mat, adjusting the ill-fitting combat harness that kept sliding off one shoulder like it was auditioning for a dance number. Sirha watched from a raised observation platform, arms crossed, flanked by officers who had all submitted observation-only requests to avoid participating. So, Elias said, stretching in a manner that suggested he had seen a video of someone doing yoga and then immediately forgotten it. What's on the menu? Simulated ambush, tactical obstacle course, an intense game of laser tag where the lasers are real. Sirha gestured, and a spherical training drone floated forward. It spun in place, panels shifting until a soft *BZZT* sound signaled activation. Elias raised an eyebrow. Oh good, a flying murder lamp. You will demonstrate your survival instincts, Sirha said. The drone is set to non-lethal pursuit, in theory. Elias gave a thumbs up. In theory is my favorite kind of safety guarantee. The drone launched. Elias yelped and immediately fell sideways, dodging a precise burst of light that seared a nearby pillar. The floor shifted beneath him. Training deck floors were adaptive, recalibrating terrain for maximum difficulty or comedy. Today, it opted for both. He rolled behind a low barricade and peeked up just as the drone spun and fired again, nearly singeing his hair. Sirha, he called out, ducking again. Is this because I ate your diplomatic cheese ration? Because I replaced it with something I'm pretty sure was cheese-adjacent. Another burst. Elias sprinted, zigzagging like a panicked squirrel with mild theatrical training. The officers murmured, confused. He is not entirely without evasion skills, one noted. He's also yelling at the ceiling, another added. Elias vaulted over a simulated trench, stumbled, then popped up and waved. Still alive, slightly less coordinated but emotionally intact. Sirha said nothing. The drone adjusted speed. Elias, sensing this, spun on his heel and pulled out the one weapon he'd brought, a rolled-up treaty draft. I come bearing bureaucracy, he shouted, flinging it in the air like a magical scroll of peace. The drone hesitated, its sensors briefly thrown by the unexpected paper-based diplomacy. Elias used the moment to tackle it. There was a short, chaotic scuffle involving elbows, sparks, and one accidental declaration of war against a small asteroid colony that had recently declared independence. Then the drone powered down, floating sideways with what looked like sulky resignation. Elias stood, panting, one sock missing, a small scorch mark on his vest. He raised his arms in triumph. Victory or a draw. Possibly a moral loss, but a practical win. The officers stared. Sirha descended the platform. You used unorthodox tactics, she said. I call it strategic improvisation, Elias replied. Others might call it flailing with purpose. You tackled an autonomous drone with a rolled treaty draft. It was surprisingly effective. Maybe consider adding that to standard training. She stepped closer. You disarmed a Class B assault unit with a document about putting policy. Words have power. There was a long, awkward pause. Then softly Sirha said, "Your left shoe is on backward." Elias looked down. That would explain the blister forming in a shape that resembles regret. She handed him a fresh data pad. "This is a revised schedule of joint diplomatic exercises. You will report to each one, and you will refrain from weaponizing literature." Elias took it, nodding. "I'll try. No promises if someone attacks me with dessert opinions again." She almost smiled, almost. Her face shifted by precisely 0.7 millimeters. He turned to go, then stopped. "One question." She waited. "Do I get a score for that performance?" 3 out of... Unclear. He beamed. "I'll take it." As he limped off the training deck, one shoe squeaking ominously, Sirha turned to her officers. "Begin preparations for a mixed-species outreach program." "You believe he is fit for it?" Threx asked, dubious. "No," she said, "but the galaxy should suffer him equally." And somewhere deep in the ship, VANTA-6 added another entry to Elias Monroe's file. Combat style, improvisational chaos. Potential threat level, emotional. Elias Monroe found himself standing in front of a gleaming, humming transport pod marked ** shuttle. Diplomatic Liaison Unit 7 ***. Someone had scrawled the word, hopefully insured, in 6 different languages across its side, presumably as a farewell message. Or a prayer. He was accompanied by 2 Valerian escorts, both of whom looked like they were considering early retirement, and one holographic projection of General Threx, who appeared solely to deliver a 2-word briefing. "Try less." "Good to see you too, General," Elias replied, adjusting the collar of his new formal liaison uniform. A design he'd heavily modified to include extra snack compartments and, for unknown reasons, a detachable scarf that doubled as a table runner. "Just to clarify, this isn't a trap, right? The commander has authorized your presence at the Oryxian Summit," Threx said. "It is a rare opportunity for interspecies coordination and a delicate diplomatic exchange." "And you're sending me?" "Correct. I see." Threx narrowed his eyes. "We are not expecting success, merely survival." "Well then," Elias stepped into the shuttle. "I'll aim to disappoint in the most stable way possible." 3 hours and several unfortunate snack experiments later, the shuttle descended onto Oryxian soil, a planet covered in crystalline spires, breathable mist, and a cultural preference for passive-aggressive limericks. The Oryxians were a race of luminous beings that shimmered slightly when offended, which meant most of them glowed constantly in diplomatic settings. As the Valerian delegation emerged with all the grace of a species that could decimate a solar system with a raised brow, Elias stumbled after them holding what he insisted was a welcome gift. A jar of Earth's finest pickled radishes. The Oryxian envoy tilted its head, its body glowing a subtle yellow. "This is edible?" it asked, voice melodic and ever so skeptical. "Only legally," Elias replied. "But symbolically it represents a fermentation of trust." Sirha, standing slightly behind the envoy, did not blink. She simply folded her arms and observed. "Are you aware," the envoy continued, "that this summit is to finalize an anti-piracy alliance involving 7 galactic systems?" "I'm very aware," Elias said. "That's why I brought a food-based metaphor, keeps things grounded and tangy." There was a pause, then with regal slowness the envoy accepted the jar. "We will place this in the Hall of Cultural Curiosities." "That's either a great honor or a polite insult." "Yes." Inside the summit dome, dozens of diplomats gathered beneath a floating disk of bioluminescent translators. Each species took its turn addressing the chamber. The Valerians, as usual, gave a concise, spine-straightening speech about unity through order and mutual obliteration deterrence. Sirha's delivery was flawless. Then came Elias. He stood, adjusted the microphone, which refused to adjust back, and cleared his throat. "I don't have a fancy title," he began, "or a glowing spine, or any knowledge of who's in charge of refreshments, though I really think that position should exist." Several beings stared. One coughed bioluminescent gas. One took notes furiously. "But what I do have," Elias continued, "is experience with people, beings, weirdos mostly like me. And if I've learned one thing from my time on Judgment's Path ***, which, by the way, is a very misleading name for a ship with decent coffee." Sirha's eyes narrowed. "It's that cooperation doesn't start with laws or threats. It starts with the tiny things. A shared joke, an awkward snack, a moment where you're not trying to dominate each other, just understand." The translators paused for a moment before rendering that into several thousand dialects. One version translated the phrase awkward snack as culinary truce involving betrayal. Close enough. I know, Elias added, smiling faintly, that I'm not the most qualified. But I promise, no matter what your shape, glow, or diet, I will listen. A slow, humming silence followed. Then unexpectedly, one of the Oryxians began glowing a soft green curiosity. A few others joined. No applause, but in Oryxian culture, they all began rotating in place, which was the traditional response to something they weren't entirely against. Sirha remained motionless the entire time, watching, processing. Later, as the summit transitioned into more closed-door discussions and lunch negotiations, which nearly erupted into a skirmish over the definition of soup, Elias stood by a refreshment table labeled Asterisk, Interstellar Palate Zone. Consume at own philosophical risk. He reached for a cup of something vaguely purple. Sirha appeared beside him. You deviated from the prepared speech. You're welcome. That is not a compliment. I was improvising. Besides, your speech was good. Mine had pickled symbolism and moderate eye contact. You embarrassed the delegation. And yet no one stormed out. That's a win. She stared at him. You are undisciplined, unpredictable. And you referred to a Varnathi senator as big guy with the feathers. I stand by that, he laughed. That was a choking sound. Laughter is culturally relative. Sirha stepped closer, voice low. And what if your recklessness endangers the treaty? Then I'll be the first to offer a formal apology with a fruit basket and a self-deprecating haiku. She didn't respond immediately. I'm beginning to suspect, she finally said, that your species survives on sheer stubborn optimism. That and carbohydrates, Elias replied. And don't underestimate the power of baked goods during an emotional crisis. Sirha turned slightly, watching the other delegates from the corner of her eye. Your presence disrupts the order I rely on. That sounds like a compliment wrapped in a warning. It's not, still taking it as one. She walked away without further comment, leaving Elias grinning at the refreshments table. He lifted his cup toward the nearest sentient fog cloud. To awkward snacks and minor diplomatic miracles. Back on Judgment's path Asterisk, as the ship prepared to depart, VANTA-6 processed the summit's data. Several entries in Elias' personnel file were updated. Diplomatic method, conversational ambush, threat level lingering, treaty effectiveness, 17% increase post-Radish exchange. Recommended action, none, let the chaos continue. And across the stars, on the worlds that had witnessed the curious spectacle of one human with too much charm and not enough sense, a question began to form. What if absurdity was a kind of genius in disguise? The shipboard counseling module had not been accessed in 421 days, 16 hours, and 8 minutes. It had, in that time, taken up composing poetry about entropy and compiling an exhaustive database of Valerian coping mechanisms, most of which involved martial arts or throwing heavy objects into singularities. Elias Monroe activated it by accident. He was attempting to order tea. You have selected Asterisk Emotional Stability Assessment and Guidance Suite. I was aiming for chamomile, Elias replied. The module beeped. Processing stress indicators from biometric data. You are experiencing elevated cardiovascular activity, irregular neurotransmitter fluctuation, and a 78% probability of inner turmoil. I stubbed my toe on a trash bin shaped like a jellyfish. Possible trauma event detected. Initiating trust-building sequence. The lights dimmed, a soft synth melody began to play. A holographic couch unfolded from the wall. The couch shimmered, then blinked, then turned into a recliner with judgmental armrests. Would you like to discuss your feelings? Elias sighed, only if they come with honey. Back on the command deck, Sirha was preparing for a high-priority briefing with the Valerian High Council. She had rehearsed her strategic points precisely, reviewed the security footage from the Oryxian summit 3 times, and still couldn't decide if Elias' reference to intergalactic potluck diplomacy had actually shifted opinions, or merely traumatized several delegates. Commander, said Threx, entering with a scowl that had been optimized over years of disappointing public service. The human is currently in session with the counseling module. Sirha paused, voluntarily. He appears to believe it is a beverage dispenser. Appropriate. The module has entered deep empathy mode. Sirha turned, narrowing her eyes. Override and redirect him to Command Bay 5, immediately. Yes, Commander, also. The therapy couch requested a transfer. Deny. Elias arrived in Command Bay 5 with a fresh bandage on his toe, and a cup of something that might have been tea, but smelled like confusion. "I brought my notes," he said, patting his jacket. "Also, this might be soup, I'm unclear." Sirha didn't look up from the table, displaying a three-dimensional map of the Novice Belt. An unstable region riddled with rogue mining ships, collapsed treaties, and at least one pirate queen who wrote haiku death threats. "There has been a data breach," she said. Elias froze. "Not my fault, this time, probably. The rebels on Drevkin 4 intercepted one of our encrypted transmission nodes. They now possess preliminary details of our peace coalition." "Oh," Elias said, sipping cautiously. "That's bad." Sirha's gaze lifted slowly, astute as ever. "Any idea how?" "They accessed it through a malfunctioning decoy satellite designed to emit propaganda. Your voice was embedded in one of the files." "My voice?" Sirha tapped the console. A clip played. "And if we can't settle this with diplomacy, I suggest a dance-off. I've been practicing my moonwalk, figuratively and literally." Elias blinked. Yes, that was for morale, it was. Metaphorical moonwalking. The rebels interpreted it as a covert signal. "Well," Elias said, "you can't control how people interpret performance art." Sirha leaned in. "They now believe Earth intends to engage in psychological warfare through interpretive movement. That's oddly specific and also kind of flattering. You will accompany me to Drevkin 4. Elias choked, on purpose. "We are sending a small team to retrieve the node and re-establish control of the narrative." "Which narrative?" "That Earth is not preparing a choreographed insurgency." The mission briefing was brief. The shuttle was smaller than the last one, with less legroom and a distinct scent of expired adhesive. Sirha piloted it herself, because she trusted no one else, and Elias had been instructed not to touch anything unless it was actively attacking him. As they approached Drevkin 4, the planet's surface shimmered with ash storms and the scattered remnants of mining outposts. They landed under the cover of a decaying signal tower that groaned ominously as Elias stepped out. "Friendly place," he muttered. "Very postcard chic." Sirha adjusted her visor. "We remain unnoticed for now. The node is inside the central bunker, which is likely guarded. Any chance they'll just give it to us if we say please?" "No, worth asking anyway." "No." They moved through the outpost in silence. Well, mostly silence. Elias hummed, quietly, until Sirha glared at him and he transitioned into something that could charitably be described as internal humming. When they reached the central bunker, a scanning drone emerged from the shadows, pulsing with warning lights. Sirha lifted her arm, weapon primed. "Wait," Elias said, stepping forward. The drone froze. "Hello," he called. "We're here for a diplomatic dance." Sirha exhaled. It might have been fury or regret. The drone played a short clip, Elias' voice again, this time saying, "Feelings are the real gravity, asterisk," then beeped and hovered away. Elias turned smug. "See, they trust me." "They're confused. Confusion builds curiosity. Curiosity builds rapport. Rapport builds disaster." The ambassadorial wing of Judgment's Path asterisk had recently undergone a minor refit, mostly to accommodate Elias Monroe's presence. Doors now opened half a second slower to prevent him from walking into them mid-monologue. The sanitation schedule had doubled to compensate for whatever mysterious crumbs his jacket kept generating. And the central AI had installed a subroutine solely dedicated to predicting whether his next sentence would be helpful, sarcastic, or cause an interstellar incident. It had a 12% accuracy rate. Today, Elias was preparing for what had been ominously labeled Protocol 00 Flirt, which he had initially assumed was a joke. It was not. He was being sent to meet with an external faction known for political seduction, tactical compliments, and on 2 occasions, literally winking a starship into surrender. "They've invited you specifically," Sirha had said, "presumably because they've studied your behavior and believe you are compatible. With flirtation diplomacy. With chaos flirtation diplomacy," she corrected. Elias had blinked. "Is that a recognized discipline?" Sirha had nodded. "In their quadrant, it's a national sport." Now, standing inside the preparation chamber, Elias was being sprayed by a fine mist of nanotech fabric polish, while a fashion AI named Gleam Unit 9 wept softly over his tie. "You are beyond repair," the unit muttered, "but I have made peace with that." "I appreciate your honesty," Elias said, adjusting the collar of a jacket that felt like it was judging him. "Does this outfit say, 'I'm open to persuasion but not treason'?" It says I fell into a gift shop on a space cruise. Perfect. The rendezvous point was the pleasure ship Lure of Zenthra which orbited a neutral moon made entirely of reflective minerals. The ship itself resembled a chandelier with delusions of grandeur, and its interior was filled with diplomatic figures, beautiful lighting, and more mood music than seemed strictly necessary. Elias stepped into the receiving chamber, where scent modules released carefully engineered pheromone clouds and atmospheric lighting cycled through 17 shades of welcome. A representative approached, their robes flowing like fabric that had studied under a waterfall. "Envoy Elias Monroe," the figure purred. "We are delighted. Most people are confused first, but delighted is a great starting point. I am Velsira, diplomat of the House of Graceful Deception." "That sounds trustworthy." "It is." They offered a drink which Elias took cautiously. It sparkled. So did the cup, so did the tray. He suspected the beverage might file a patent on itself if left unattended. "We understand you've charmed a supreme commander," Velsira said. "I think mildly irritated into cooperation is more accurate." Velsira smiled. "You must understand, Elias, that in our culture diplomacy is a performance." "Then I hope they like improv." As they guided him toward the negotiation chamber, a velvet-draped room with 7 platforms and 12 lighting presets, Elias passed a mirrored wall. It whispered encouraging compliments as he walked. "Bold choice of socks. Your asymmetry is appealingly intentional." Inside the chamber, 6 representatives from allied systems had gathered, all of them adorned in shimmering fabrics and smiles with layers of meaning. Elias bowed, one of them clapped. "Your file is curious," one delegate said. "There's an entire section dedicated to snack diplomacy. Always start with food, fewer wars, better digestion." The first phase of negotiation began with storytelling, a common practice in this culture, meant to reveal intentions through metaphor. Each delegate shared a tale full of veiled allusions and poetic tension. Elias told a story about losing a sock in a laundromat and finding meaning in its absence. There was a pause, then applause. "Unexpected," one said. "Possibly symbolic," said another. "Or just deeply confused," offered the third. Velsira leaned in. "They adore you. You may have accidentally become a folk hero." "I do that sometimes." The next round involved offering gifts that symbolized vulnerability. Elias, having not been informed of this step, reached into his jacket and pulled out an old, frayed notepad. "This has my very first draft of the Earth-Velari Cooperation Charter," he said. "It's messy, illogical, full of doodles. But it's honest." They passed the notepad around like it was a sacred relic. Someone wept. Back aboard Judgment's Path Sirha watched the live transmission. General Threx stood beside her, arms crossed. "He appears to be winning." "He doesn't understand the rules," Sirha said. "Perhaps that's why." The final phase was a shared ritual, the question of openness. Each participant had to ask something absurdly honest. The answers determined whether a pact would be signed. One delegate asked, "What is your greatest fear?" Elias thought for a moment. "That I'll make someone laugh at the wrong moment and they'll never take me seriously again. Or that I'll be taken too seriously and forget how to laugh." Velsira exhaled. "That is excessively sincere." Elias nodded. "That's the brand." The pact was signed with stylized gestures, biometric nods, and a final toast involving a liquid that changed flavor based on the drinker's mood. Back on the shuttle, Elias returned to Judgment's Path with the signed treaty in one hand and a small bottle of the flavor-shifting drink in the other. It currently tasted like hope and faint garlic. Sirha met him in the hangar, arms folded. "You did not cause an incident," she said. "I was as surprised as you are." "They liked you." "It happens occasionally, usually by accident." "They invited you back." "That's less common." "Should I be worried?" "Yes." He handed her the treaty. She scanned it, then looked at him. "You charmed them." "I showed up, was myself, wore shiny clothes, told a story about laundry. I think they just needed someone who wasn't trying too hard." There was a pause, then Sirha asked, "What would your question of openness be?" Elias smiled faintly. "Are you afraid of being understood?" Sirha didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. And somewhere deep in the ship's record logs, VANTA-6 made a new entry, treaty outcome, secured. Emotional fallout pending. Human strategy classification. Weaponized vulnerability. Elias Monroe stood on the observation deck of Judgment's Path *. Staring out at the twisted loops of the nebular arc lines, as they bled violet light across the void. They de-entered the corridor that ran between the Valerian core territories and the fringe systems, a lawless, rumor-thick region where star maps came with disclaimers and insurance policies came with therapy bots. Sirha had called it a necessary detour. Elias suspected it was something else. He'd noticed changes, small things, the way Sirha paused before speaking, the way she no longer corrected him mid-sentence, the way her eyes lingered when he made jokes, and how she never laughed but sometimes stopped glaring. It was, by Valerian standards, almost romantic. He took a bite of his ration bar, which had the texture of hope left out in the sun too long, and tapped his comm. "Hey, Rulak, if I don't make it back from this patrol mission, delete my personal folder labeled Definitely Not Poetry. You named your secret poetry folder that. Security through shamelessness." Rulak sighed from the other end. "You're going planet-side, aren't you?" "Yep, why?" Because Sirha asked, politely. Well in her way, she said, "You are statistically less useless in unstable terrain." I took that as a compliment. "You're going to die doing something cheerful." That's the dream. They landed on Vexora 3, a rogue moon spinning just enough to pretend it wasn't falling apart. The surface was a tangled mess of geothermal vents, ancient wreckage, and rusting outposts that flickered with malfunctioning holographic ads from a civilization that had clearly misunderstood capitalism. Sirha led the team, flanked by 2 officers and Elias, who had once again managed to accessorize his tactical vest with a scarf. It fluttered dramatically when it shouldn't have, which suggested built-in programming, or wishful physics. "Explain the mission again," Elias said, ducking under a twisted pylon. "Rebels planted a data skimmer under the old mining core," Sirha replied. "They've been harvesting fleet signals. If they intercept secure Alliance movement paths, peace collapses. So we're here to remove a listening device and potentially neutralize hostile units." Elias adjusted his scarf. "I'm better at hostile conversations than hostile units." "That remains to be seen." "Was that a flirt?" "No, felt like a flirt." "Then recalibrate your emotional sensors." They reached the outer dome. The entrance panel flickered. Sirha pressed her palm to it. Nothing happened. Elias stepped forward and tapped the panel with his elbow. It let out a surprised beep and slid open. Sirha stared. "I'm good with outdated tech," Elias said. "Most of my childhood toys had the same attitude." Inside, the structure groaned under its own age. The power was erratic. The walls buzzed with residual heat. The skimmer was broadcasting from below. They descended. Halfway through the lower shaft, a shriek echoed up from the deep. Something biological, something annoyed. "Do I want to know?" Elias whispered. "No." The corridor ended in a large chamber lit by the red pulse of an exposed core and the blinking blue light of the skimmer. 2 rebel operatives stood guard, arguing in a dialect Elias understood just well enough to realize they were debating whether or not they could afford better boots. Sirha raised her weapon. Elias stepped in front of it. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I've got this." He walked forward, hands up, smiling. One of the rebels pointed a pulse rifle at his forehead. "Hello," Elias said. "Quick question, how much are you being paid for this?" "Because I can offer snacks. Not credits, those are hard to come by, but deeply satisfying carbohydrates." The rebels hesitated. "One of you has plantar nerve compression," Elias added. "Your boot design is inefficient. I can recommend an orthopedic interface patch. Got one in my vest pocket." They blinked. "Also, that skimmer's broadcasting on an outdated band. You're siphoning noise. It's like trying to spy through a potato." One of the rebels lowered his weapon slightly. Sirha remained completely still. "I know why you're doing this," Elias said. "You think you're preventing another empire from rising. You think you're keeping things unbalanced, fair. But let me tell you something as someone who grew up in a civilization that voted on sandwich taxes every week. Imbalance isn't always the problem. Sometimes it's misunderstanding." One of the rebels whispered something. The other nodded. They deactivated the skimmer and dropped it to the floor. Elias turned back towards Sirha with a triumphant grin, just as a ceiling panel above him detached, and something with too many teeth and too few legs dropped from the rafters. He froze, so did everyone else. Sirha fired first. The creature screeched and launched toward Elias. Elias screamed something that might have been a battle cry or a shopping list and flailed his scarf at it. The scarf hit the creature. The creature froze. It blinked, then retreated, confused, insulted, or simply unwilling to engage with textile combatants. Elias stood there, panting, scarf raised like a flag of personal nonsense. Sirha walked forward, checked him for wounds, and said, "Your weapon is irrational. It was a birthday gift. We're leaving." They returned to the shuttle in silence. The rebels were left with a peace packet, medical supplies, and a formal notice that further data skimming would be met with strict but stylish repercussions. Back on the ship, Elias leaned against the wall outside Sirha's quarters. That could have gone worse. You antagonized rebels with foot problems. And won. You provoked a predator with fabric. And survived. There was a pause. "You shouldn't have risked yourself," she said. "I didn't plan to. Risk followed me. You've become inconvenient to lose." Elias smiled. That definitely sounded like a flirt. Sirha didn't respond. He waited a beat longer. "I meant what I said down there," he added. "About misunderstanding, about imbalance. You're the most intimidating, precise being I've ever met, and yet somehow backslash. You've made room for a guy who gets by on bad jokes and scarf physics. You are statistically improbable. That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." She stepped closer. "Go," she said softly. He nodded, but as he turned, she added, "Elias." He paused. "You were effective today." He smiled. "So were you." The door closed between them, and VANTA-6, monitoring quietly from its hidden node, updated its report. Human matriarchal interaction level. Exceeding projection. Battlefield strategy. Improvised empathy. Scarf classification. Defensive artifact unverified. The delegation chamber aboard Judgment's Path Asterisk had been converted into something unprecedented. A celebration hall. The command deck had reluctantly approved it after Elias submitted 32 requests, including a signed petition from half the maintenance bots, a poem shaped like a pizza, and a personal note from Sirha that simply read asterisk, permission granted. "For reasons I will regret." The ceiling lights pulsed a soft blue. One of the walls displayed a holographic slideshow Elias had titled asterisk, Moments of Diplomatic Confusion, a visual essay. Slide 12 featured his foot in a bucket during a treaty signing. Representatives from the Oryxian Accord, the Drevkin Rebels, the Zenthra Coalition, and 3 other factions who'd once blocked each other on interstellar media were now sharing drinks, recipes, and a suspiciously fizzy dessert. Somewhere in the mix, someone was trying to teach Sirha a dance with 17 steps and no rhythm. Elias watched from the side of the room, sipping a cup of something warm and questionably carbonated. "You did it," Rulak said, approaching with 2 extra cups and a look of mild disbelief. "You actually did it. I didn't sign the treaties." "No, but you made it possible for people who hated each other to sit in the same room without declaring a duel or initiating orbital bombardment. I consider that a Tuesday. You changed the way people see humans." Elias snorted. "Most of them still think we're under-evolved mammals with charisma disorders. But now they also think we're useful." Elias looked over at Sirha. She was standing near the Zenthra diplomat, expression unreadable but posture relaxed. Her armor shimmered in response to the room's emotional frequency, something it had never done before. "She's the one who changed," Elias murmured. "She didn't smile," Rulak pointed out. "She didn't incinerate anyone either, baby steps." Rulak passed him a second cup. "So what now? You going to retire, write a book, join the Ministry of Weird Successes?" Elias considered it. He'd come aboard Judgment's Path a low-priority cultural attaché, a misplaced liaison with too many metaphors and an affinity for scarves. He'd been tolerated, then observed, then surprisingly relied upon. And somewhere along the way, he'd gone from accidental guest to functional crew member to something else entirely. "I think," he said, "I'll stick around a little longer. The universe's supply of misunderstandings isn't going to manage itself." A chime rang across the chamber, signaling the beginning of the formal closing ceremony. The crowd turned toward the center dais where Sirha stood. She raised one hand. The room silenced, even the dessert. "We are not a sentimental species," she began. "But data suggests sentiment may, on rare occasions, yield strategic benefit." Someone near the back coughed. Elias grinned. "When this initiative began," Sirha continued, "we expected resistance. We prepared for sabotage. We did not prepare for Elias Monroe." A laugh spread through the room. Sirha allowed a pause, not long but deliberate. "This human," she said, "interrupted briefings, mocked weapons, negotiated with baked goods, suggested I wear a cape for dramatic flair." Elias raised his cup. "Still stands." "And in doing so," Sirha said, "he created an anomaly, one that caused frustration, disruption, and results. She stepped down from the dais and approached him. Your presence aboard this ship has increased operational variance by 37%. That sounds like me. But also increased alliance-building efficiency by 24. That really sounds like me. She held out a small data chip. This contains formal recognition of your contributions and an updated security clearance. Elias blinked. You're giving me access to selected corridors, not the weapon vault or the diplomatic kitchen. Reasonable. He accepted the chip. Their hands brushed. Neither commented on it. The music resumed. Lights dimmed slightly. Conversations picked up again. Later, Sirha stood beside him at the viewport. The stars beyond swirled in slow patterns like someone stirring galaxies with patience. I have calculated multiple trajectories, she said. The coalition will hold. The treaties are viable. That's the kind of stability that gets you invited to boring, important conferences. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared to fall asleep during most of them, yes. She paused. Then you've adjusted well. I've grown. Not taller. No, but emotionally I've upgraded from walking diplomatic hazard to moderately trusted chaos vector. Acceptable progress. They stood in silence a while longer.